Welcome to the Tag Talks podcast. Today I'm joined by Coach Jackson Yanchus. How you doing, Jackson?
Good. Glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, thank you for taking the time to come on here and chat with me. Hopefully we'll have some fun. Why don't you start us off? Tell us about kind of where you grew up, where you played, and where you're at coaching nowadays.
So, I grew up in Guelph, Ontario, played high school football and summer ball there, and I was at John F. Ross. I was fortunate to go through there at the same time as a bunch of other really good athletes. So got to play on some pretty good high school football and rugby teams there. And then ultimately, was really looking to pursue football. And I got one opportunity at Wilfrid Laurier, and, I've kind of been there ever since. So I played my first 2 years there, had some issues with concussions, and ultimately after my second season decided, hey, I've got to make the decision to move on to coaching. But I asked Coach Falds, who was actually in his first year at Laurier at the time, hey, can I come help out? And I'll do whatever. And I knew I wanted to coach. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So I just thought it'd be a great experience for me. I never really grew up with the intention of I want to coach in university. I always thought I'd coach in high school. But I just fell in love with it. And, I got to work for Irv Damon. He was my positional coach at Laurier, and then I was his assistant for 2 years. And then kind of once I finished my undergrad and knew I wanted to go to teachers college, I took a year off, and I actually got the opportunity to start coaching our running backs. So I've been coaching our running backs, fullbacks, and tight ends at Laurier. This next year would be my 6th year. And then I've also been really fortunate to get some opportunities to coach in the community. While I was playing, I was coaching with Junior Griffins, and was part of kind of turning that JV program around with you, Andrew, and Coach Nez and Coach Taggart. And I look back on that staff, and we had so many awesome guys. My buddy Mark, who's now coaching at St. Mary's, actually out east. We had Kevin Huntley on that staff, pretty crazy. So that was a great experience, and that's where I really fell in love with coaching. I was still playing, and I knew I'd probably want to coach when I was done. But when you're coaching the JV level, it's so important that you do a good job, right? And your kids, you can see improvement in them in a 5-minute period, right? Some of those guys have played football for 2 weeks, you know what I mean? Or they're trying football because their buddy down the street played on the team last year. And so that was really fun, and just fell in love with it, and got a chance, I think, to coordinate my last year there, and we won the provincial championship. And then I got the job as the head coach of the Cambridge Lions in senior, and I've been doing that ever since. So I really do love the high school aspect. I think it's super rewarding. I was a super under-recruited guy, not because people were making mistakes. I just wasn't that good. So I know what it's like to be a high school guy that wants to continue their playing career, but it's not just going to be easy for you. And I would, like I said, I played on a stacked high school team. I played with a lot of other really good players. And so, there was a lot of hard days for me when other guys were getting recruited after games and I wasn't. And I had a couple coaches in my summer ball career, really, I think, helped make the difference to get me to that level. So it's been something I've really enjoyed kind of giving back to, and something I hope to stay involved with for sure.
Yeah, man. Like you said, I feel the exact same way. I had so many influential coaches in my life in high school and in summer football. And that was kind of what was the driving force for me to start coaching as well. Even while I was playing, like you mentioned, that was, man, we're dating ourselves now. I don't even know what year that was. Was that summer of 2013 was, I think, maybe our first year?
Maybe we started. We had a couple of years that were tough at the start. I always like to remember that last one.
Yeah. I actually wasn't there. I wasn't on the staff that one. I took that summer off. So I coached the year before when we struggled. Took a year off. You guys won the championship, and then I came back to Junior Griffs, took over as head coach. We had our struggles for a couple more years. So I actually missed out on the championship season.
Oh, well, that was that group of guys, man, that couple years. It was so fun to see. And, like I said, I was born and raised in Guelph and grew up playing Guelph minor football. I played on a lot of teams that we weren't very good. And it was really fun to, kind of be a part of building that program up. And the competition in summer ball now is so good.
Oh, yeah.
When I look at what I played, even the level of football you're playing, right? You were going to see one front all the time, offenses were running a couple formations, nowadays, you got guys coordinating and head coaching and positional coaching those summer teams that are like qualified university coaches, guys who played in the CFL. So it was really fun. Those years, I really like. I never look back from that original coaching experience. I think the year before we won was my second year working with Nez. And the fun thing about that stuff is we had so many guys that were currently playing. Like Matt was still playing, I was still playing, you were still playing. Charlie was like in his first year. We had a bunch of other guys that helped us coach as well. So it was kind of cool that, while we were all still in that playing phase of our career, I think that was a good way for us to be competitive ourselves in the summer and have some fun with that. But also, I think you could really see how many guys really cared about the game there.
Yeah, and it's really cool, like you said, to see kind of all those guys that were on that staff. Fast forward now 5 years later or 6 years later, and you see the positions that everyone's in now, and it is kind of cool to look back and think of where it all started with Nesbitt putting that staff together and
Bunch of beauties
and bugging us all to come out. I know at first maybe I was a bit hesitant, even though I've always wanted to coach. I always knew that, but I had this idea in my head, like, oh, I'm still playing. I should focus on myself. And I had that talk with Nesbitt, and he's just like, man, this is such a great opportunity for you to give back and share with the kids. And I was like, you know what? I love coaching so much. I need to, no sense in waiting. Let's just dive on in. And that was, that definitely makes that transition when you do have to face the noise and your athletic career ends. That transition after is so much easier when you can still be a part of the game you love. And you mentioned briefly kind of in the intro there that you went through that transition there after your second year at Laurier. So
yep.
How was that transition for you? Like you said, you had some coaching experience already, but to actually say, hey, this is all I'm going to do from this point forward. Like, what was that like?
It was both really hard and really easy all at the same time. So like for me, I had everyone's career is different. And, I was fortunate. My dad was my high school head coach, and he had, a great playing experience at UG, played for his hometown team, won a national championship. And his career actually ended a little early because of injuries too. So I never took the game for granted, because I was like, man, like my dad's my hero. If that guy's career could end before he wanted to, like it can happen to anybody. Right. And so I always knew that whether it was high school, like I loved practice. Like not one time did I ever think, man, like I wish I was, hanging out with my buddies right now. Like this is what I would rather be doing, And so I never really had I obviously had regrets in terms of I would have liked to achieve more as a player at the university level. But like I knew that I had done everything I could do to try and get myself to that position. So I was almost like at peace that way. The hard part was like with concussions, you've got to be the one to decide.
Yeah.
Like if you break your leg and you can't run anymore, like they'll just tell you like, look, dude, you can't play anymore. But with concussions, it's so much of it is on you to be honest with yourself about where you're at. And, I was lucky in high school. I think I had one, and it was very minor. It wasn't a big thing I went in university like worrying about. As a 250-pound lineman, I probably should have been a little more worried. But, I got two in my first year, one in training camp, and then one in the spring. And I missed most of the spring, and I missed, I think, the first 4 weeks of the season. And so, I spent most of the spring kind of learning my second year, or going into my second year. And that was Coach Fald's first year. And I got to work with Coach Damon, who I know you know as well.
My dude.
And, yeah, man. And he just expanded my mind to like the level of detail you can play the game with. And so I loved it. I felt, my first year hadn't gone exactly how I wanted. I had no, delusions like, oh yeah, I'm going to, probably start or play or whatever. We had a bunch of injuries, and in the end of the year, I did get a chance to get on the field and actually played the playoff game. But, so I felt really good about that. Cause I was really I was super undersized, and there was a long time in high school, I really wasn't sure if I was going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did really take a lot of pride in the fact hey, I started a playoff game, and a lot of guys go their whole career and they don't start a playoff game. Now don't ask me how many points we scored in that game. Not a good number. But so going into that second year, I was super excited because, Coach Falds is a John F. Ross guy, and, I had grown up, seeing him play and knowing about him and his story, and obviously his great career at Western. And, I was super excited. He was our head coach. And I really felt like this is like a leader I can get behind. And Coach Damon was so good about – I had learned a lot about offensive line play, and then Coach Damon got there, and I felt like I knew nothing. And so I was really excited for my second year. But I'd already had these 2 concussions. And my first year, I spent a good 2 months in the fall, almost 2 months, maybe 6 weeks, concussed, and then about another 6 or 8 weeks in the spring. And so I came back into fall camp and I said, look, like if I get another concussion, I should probably look at, stepping away, because to that point, I'd been in university for a year and I had been concussion free for, half the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dressed and I was playing, and that was the really hard part, was like, I really felt like I was improving and I felt like I had so much more to go. I knew, I loved the weight room and I knew I was developing there, and I was healthy for like 8 months in a row, which I really hadn't been. Actually, the summer in high school, I got hurt playing rugby my senior year of high school. So I was 6 weeks out in that summer as well. So in terms of off seasons, and, it's so important to have that consistency. I hadn't had just 12 months to lift weights and be strong. And so I was about 8 months into being, concussion free, feeling good. And I was strong. I got up to in the 260s. And I really felt like my best football was ahead of me. And I got another one. And at the time, I didn't right away, make the decision, okay, I'm done. I just kind of waited to see what the process was going to be like for my recovery. And, 6 months later, I wasn't any better. And that was kind of when I made the decision, look, I shouldn't say I wasn't any better. I was better, but I wasn't back.
Yeah.
I just made the tough decision, talked to my family and, just said, hey, I love the game, but I can't keep risking what I'm doing. And, that was a tough decision. But like I said, at the same time, I didn't really feel like I had a choice.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't really feel I didn't look back on my 2 years playing at Laurier, a year and a half, and say, man, I wish I had worked out harder, or I wish I had spent more time with Coach Irv watching film. I could have enjoyed playing more. I couldn't have enjoyed playing more. I loved that experience. And I don't look back on that, with any regrets in terms of my process. And I think that's a big thing, for players, is people talk about having no regrets. And it doesn't mean you don't wish things were different. It just means you don't wish you did anything differently.
Yeah.
And it was something that wasn't totally in my control. And I was fortunate, that Coach Faulds let me come on the staff right away. And Coach Damon was, super supportive of trying to help my career, and he would take so much extra time and teach me stuff and let me be really involved with the guys. And, that made it a lot easier too, as I didn't feel like I didn't have football, I just wasn't able to strap them up.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, it just becomes, like you said, hey, this is how I play football now. I throw on a headset and I call some shots and I watch film and do that stuff. And it's just a mind flip. But it's actually, it's so hilarious. Like you said, I know Irv and I also grew up watching Faulds play. I grew up just south of London. So pretty much Faulds' whole career, I got to watch him play, had a ton of respect for him and loved the way he competed. And I always remember that his final game, I can't remember if he was messed his knee up or tore his ACL. I can't remember the specifics, but I just remember, man, they needed one last shot and the boys carried him out there. He couldn't even walk. They carried him on the field so he could try and sling one last throw to get them to win the game. And I remember being a high school kid watching that, and I was just like, that was the most gangster thing I've ever seen in my life. This guy's unbelievable.
He's a great leader, man. He really he never asks his guys to do something he's not willing to do. When our guys work out and we lift, as a team, and we'll have, obviously before all this COVID stuff, we'd have 80 of our guys in the gym together, or close to. Some guys are in the warm up phase, some guys are in the cool down phase, some guys are lifting, whatever. But we kind of have 3 time slots, but they all overlap. Mm-hmm. And the first guy in there, and we do attendance, at every lift. And the first guy there is Coach Faulds. It's not the strength coach taking attendance. It's not, at 6 a.m. It's not, hey, sign in on your phone. he's got his pen and paper there and he's working. So, he's a special guy to play for, and it's been a hugely fortunate thing for me as a young coach to be around another young guy who's worked so hard to prepare himself for the opportunities in now, and the way that he's kind of led our program, has shaped how I feel about football for sure.
Oh yeah. And I even like you said, like his leadership qualities stood out even to me as a high school kid watching him play. And when I was going through the recruiting process, he was actually at York.
Yep.
And man, the only reason, no offense to York, but like the only reason I was picking up those phone calls when they called was because it was Falls on the other end of the line. And I'm like, you know what, man, I wouldn't even consider going to York, but it would be kind of cool to like play for this guy, man. I got a lot of respect for him. So, that guy was considering them for a little while he was there, just because the way he was talking about things. And I was totally sold on it in some respects. So
yeah.
The other thing that was real funny about, what you said and kind of some overlaps that we have in our kind of experiences in the past was with Irv. Like you said, when you first met Irv, he completely kind of exposed you to this new layer of football that you never knew existed. And that was the exact same for me. So like I said earlier, I grew up just south of London. I played football and went to high school at Parkside Collegiate. Irv went there back in the day. And so it was like my last year of high school, and Irv was coaching at Ottawa, and they didn't make the playoffs. So he hightailed it back to St. Thomas. He comes in and starts coaching our offense, changes everything. We're about to go into week 1 of playoffs, changes almost everything in our playbook, makes all these tweaks. And all of a sudden, like, that was what kind of took us to that next level. We went on, we won our division. And like you said, he will make as much time for you to talk about football as possible, man.
100%.
I sat after every practice and talked to Irv for like 30, 40 minutes. My parents are like sitting in the van, like, come on, let's go. And I'm just like, no, I'm man, I'm going to soak this up and learn as much as I can from Irv as possible. So yeah, a couple of really cool dudes that kind of gave you your opportunity and kind of helped you springboard through the coaching ranks relatively quickly for a young coach. Like you said, you kind of went from player to just kind of helping out to being where you're at now. And that's a pretty fast, I would say, trajectory over a short amount of time. Like, what have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned kind of as a young coach over the last 5-6 years?
I think like the first thing, and when you go from playing to coaching, you're so eager to help, right?
Yeah.
And I think and that's good. Like, you got to keep that, you know what I mean? And that is one of the things I think, like, young coaches, I feel like obviously there's no substitute for experience, right? Like, I work with a guy, Laurier, who's been coaching football at Laurier for 30 years, and Ron Van Morkirk, RDC. There's no substitute for that experience.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that you can try and do to make up the gap. And the first thing is your energy, right? And I think that that's something that as a young coach, like, you're right out of playing, you still have that, like, this is your first or second or third year, coaching and training camp. It all feels new again, so you really got to try and bring energy and just be authentic. Not everyone has the same energy, and that's good because not all your players have the same energy.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, we would have guys, like, I look back on that Guelph staff, we probably had some D linemen that loved playing for Kevin Huntley and some D linemen that were terrified of playing for Kevin Huntley. Right. So it's good that you have, like, we had Pat was our other D line coach, right? That's such a great combination of guys to kind of, cultivate success in your group, because not all your guys can be the same. So whatever your energy is, just like authentically, you got to bring that, whether you're like the calm, cool, and collected focus guy, or, you're excited running up and down the field, keeping guys positive. And that was one of the main things I tried to do, as a young coach, is like, you got to try and keep guys positive, because you haven't earned the credibility with your players yet to be the guy that's shitting on them.
Yeah.
At least you haven't earned that authentically. Right. So especially in your first year, like, if it's your first year with a new program, like, you got to try and be the positive guy. You got to be real and honest with people, but you've got to show them that you can help them get better. And the best way to do that is to try and bring positive energy.
Yep.
Right. People want to be around positive people. Right. It's like in anything. You go and sit in the break room at work and there's 3 people moping on their phone, and one guy having a good conversation, you're not going to go sit with the three people moping on their phone.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing in coaching. Like your players are going to gravitate towards positive energy. So that's a big one. Cause the other thing as a young coach, you fully realize exactly how much players screw up. like as a player, you have no idea how much you screw up.
Oh,
You
yeah.
only know what the coach told you screwed up. Now, when you're a coach and you're looking at like 12 guys and you're looking at the whole film, like I remember sometimes I'm like, man, like we can't get anything right,
Yeah.
you know? And like, we were winning games, So it's like you want to direct your energy towards fixing the mistakes, but you also got to understand like it's a process and everyone makes mistakes, and you really got to try and again focus on the positive and look to be as efficient as you can in fixing those. I would say too, like you got to love learning the game and not just like learning the stuff that interests you. Like
Yeah.
we all have those things that like interest us, but you've got to try and learn as much as you can from as many people, because I'm 7 or 8 years in now. We just got Coach Galloway's another guy I know as well. He just came in as our OC. He's got a different, his terminology and the way that he describes offense, totally different from other guys that have influenced me. Right. So I was, coaching in the OUA for 7 years, and we're sitting down listening to this playbook, and it's structured totally differently. And so learning like the why behind why different guys do things is super valuable, because your style is always evolving.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that as a young coach, you got to recognize, like you got to learn offense, defense, technique, you got to try and learn as much as you can, because ultimately you're only as good as your understanding of the whole game.
Yeah.
Right. If you understand your position, that's great. There's a place for that. But you can only coach your position so well without understanding the context of the rest of the game. Like I played O-line, and, obviously I'm living in the O-line world. I understand the box. I understand, O-line and D-line play to some level. But you're only as good at, drawing up a protection as you are at understanding blitzes. And to understand blitzes, you got to understand coverage.
Mm-hmm.
To understand coverage, you got to understand fundamentals of cover players. So the more connections you can make and the more you can learn different parts of the game, I think that's the key. And that's the fun part for me, honestly, is that approach to like, there's so much new in football and there's so much different, right? Like you can spend your whole life learning how different people score touchdowns and stop people from scoring touchdowns.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's one of the cool things about our game is there's so much variety, and you have so many choices as a coach.
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, like that's how we play football now. Right. Like I don't ever feel like, oh, I'm just on the side coaching, and, there's a reason that coaches aren't on the sideline in a suit and tie. Right. Like you're playing the game. It's just, you're a decision maker that helps others instead of being the guy that finishes it. So, I would say that's my biggest advice: positive energy, focus on the stuff that's going well, and try and build that credibility with your players, and then learn as much as you can about as much as you can, because it just, you keep opening your eyes to like new possibilities. And like, my opinion on pass protection, totally different now that I've coached running backs.
Oh, yeah.
My thoughts on offensive football, totally different now that I've been a defensive coordinator in summer football. Right. So it's that aspect, which sometimes like guys, I think, just get too nailed down. Like, okay, I'm an O-lineman, I got to learn everything about O-line. That's great. That's true. But, or you're a quarterback coach, like I got to learn everything about playing quarterback. You got to learn the game. And that's the fun part to me.
Yeah, and like you said, if you're a positional coach or even like a player, like I think a lot of the things that you just said will be applicable to athletes as well. It's like, of course,
sure.
Get your base understanding of your position first. Don't overload yourself and try and learn the world all at once when you don't know anything. Like, learn your position first, but don't get content with just knowing what you're doing, because like you said, that's the beauty of football. Is there is so much going on and it all works together. And if one piece is just off ever so slightly, the whole thing crumbles. And so it's really understanding how all these moving pieces work and support each other to make a system work. Because that's what football is, right? It's offensive system, defensive system, special team systems, and systems are made up of all these separate parts. So yeah, master your understanding of your part of that system, but expand, learn the whole system, and then learn how other people are going to try and prevent you from doing what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
And so that goes true for, athletes too. Like, I think everything you said, like, is completely applicable to athletes. Like, understand what you're doing, but then, if you're an offensive lineman, figure out defensive lineman tactics, strategies, things that they're going to try and do. Understand your quarterback. What's his drop? Okay, what's he trying to do? Because if he's got a 3-step drop, then you're probably going to, execute your technique a little different than if he has like a 5-step or whatever. And so it's like, never get content with just that base level of knowledge. Have that kind of white belt mentality where you're just always learning and always just trying to take it up one other level.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that was one thing, like, I was fortunate. I think a lot of linemen are actually where, like, if you go to a high school and there's not that many linemen, like, you just play both ways. And, I got to play. I started my career on D-line. I wound up playing – like, I was a defensive player until grade 11, right? And then we needed guys to help out in the O-line. I started playing O-line. And I never would have gotten an opportunity to play university football as a D-lineman. It wasn't going to happen, right? So – that lesson for athletes, I think, is huge. And it just helps you enjoy the game more, right? Like, I think so many guys are like fans of football, and like they'll play Madden and they'll watch games on Sundays and Saturdays. And don't get me wrong, like, I do that stuff too, but take time to learn what other people are doing, because you'll have so much more, and it takes so much of the anxiety out of it, right? Like, as a coach, like, performance is all about confidence.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't fake confidence. You can until you play someone who actually knows what they're doing. So, like, when you can take that authentic confidence into a situation and say, hey, I'm playing a really good D lineman this week. Not only do I know what I'm going to do, I actually understand, like, why does he use a rip move? Like, why is he always using a swim move on me while I'm overextended? You know what I mean? Like, when you know those things on the other side of the ball, it helps you in your current situation. And then you never know where you're going to be, right? You never know what you're going to be coaching and or playing, and positionally stuff changes all the time. So I think that's great advice for sure.
No, and like you said right there, it just keeps opportunities open. Like you said, in high school, you're playing D line and then O line, and then in university, you're coaching running backs, fullbacks. Like, you know what I mean? You have to have that understanding of so much more, because, if you didn't have that, Coach Falls probably is never going to put you as a running back coach, because he's going to say, what the hell is he going to teach these guys? How to kick step? Like, that's we're not going to have a very productive offense if that's what our RBs are doing. So it's like you said. So we were talking about a little bit about this. I guess this will maybe be a little bit of a harsh transition, but we're talking about all this football. It's obviously super exciting. And we were talking about this before the show started, but kind of like, what's the projections looking like over the next little bit with football? Obviously things are a little gray right now, and we love the game and we're still excited about learning, but for athletes and parents and all that kind of stuff out there that are a little curious, like, how is this going to play out on the football world over the next little bit?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this before. So, obviously yesterday, I guess depending on when you're listening to this, but yesterday the OPFL canceled their season, which obviously sucks. And, it's right now, it's just kind of a necessary evil. And, there's stuff going on in the world right now that it's not going to let us play football. So, right now that's the reality. I think anyone who tries to predict this current situation has to be way smarter than me. But, I think it's certainly changing. It was interesting. Like, I honestly thought, like, when this whole thing started, and I'm a head coach in the OPFL, I was like, okay, things are going to be different in the world for like a month. And if we do a really good job preparing during this month, like, we'll be successful when we come out of it. And then it kind of was like, okay, maybe this is going to be more than that. We're going to have a shortened season or maybe no season. And I kind of just said to our guys, I'm like, look, I can't guarantee when we're going to play next or like who we're going to play, but it's still my job as a head coach to try and help you guys. So we kept running, once a week meetings. I got my defenses coming on tonight. And it's optional for the guys now, obviously, but, I think at some point this is going to end, right? At some point we'll be back playing football and doing all the other things we like to do. And there'll be some people that got a little bit better, some people that got a lot better, and some people that'll come out of this and go, oh, COVID ruined my chance to do this or that. And, we're all living in the same world, right? The whole world's got COVID. Yeah. So, and now everyone's got different realities too. Like, I totally get this. Like, I mean, I'm a teacher by profession, and, I'm teaching right now, and everyone's reality is so different, right? People's parents are losing their jobs. People, themselves aren't able to do the work they normally do. people are having to, scrape by and try and, get through this thing. And so I think it's kind of tough. And for my message to my players is this, like, look, if you have time right now, because not everyone does, I think that's a bit of a misnomer, but if you have time right now, we're going to keep trying to do these meetings when we normally practice,
Mm-hmm.
and it's only once a week and we're meeting for an hour or 45 minutes. And we're not talking like, oh, this is this blitz into this or whatever. It's more like teaching you football. And, we're trying to get some cut ups, and we've had some guests come on and stuff to our Zoom meetings and that. But, it's a situation where I think people just got to say, okay, this is the time that I have right now. Like, what am I going to do with it? Like, I saw an awesome video this morning. Guy had like a bed, and he was laying under his bed, and it has a bar on the bottom, and he was just doing like floor press, like pressing his bed up. You know what I mean? And you got to do what you can do, and you can't do what you can't do. I think that's something that people obsess about all the time, stuff they can't control, right? We can't practice, and we shouldn't practice right now. Your high school gym's not open because you're not at school like you used to, whatever, right? Your good life's closed, whatever it is that you're doing. But you just got to find a way to try and get better. And I think, one thing that might come out of this, honestly, is I think football coaches are learning to use technology a lot better. I know this football coach is certainly learning to use technology a lot better. And, even like having cut-ups for our guys in the summer, we had time to build those that we normally wouldn't have. Like, we have game film and stuff, but like we don't have like teach tape.
Yeah.
And now we've been able to build that. So that'll be something we carry forward. And that is something I think is a positive, and for coaches and for players, even though the players might not get the benefit right now, or the coaches that are learning new systems or new techniques and stuff, they might not be able to coach them right now. But when the game comes back, I think if we do our job as athletes and as players, the game can be even better than it is right now.
Yeah. Well, and I 100% agree with your stance on things. And if we were to say that we have some prediction for how this is going to unfold, we'd be lying. Like, it takes people far smarter than us two knuckleheads to come up with how this is going to look. But my message is very similar to what you've been saying. And I said this to some of my athletes that I'm working with yesterday. It's like, hey, I get it. It probably feels like the world is ending right now. It probably feels like, this summer was vitally important for you to get recruited and all that stuff. And guess what? It was. And it's gone. And you're going to miss out on that opportunity to get recruited. I'm not saying that to be, negative. I'm just saying these are the facts. This is real. But 3 to 4 years from now, I almost guarantee you can look back to this as a pivotal moment. And those guys in 3 to 4 years that are being successful are going to be the ones that kind of took this as an opportunity, looked at themselves, said, what are my weak points, and attacked those, right? Like you said, it took away football. For a lot of people, it's taken away the gym. Man, that is such a small part of being a successful student athlete, a successful
100%.
football player, or whatever sport you play. So it's like you said, you can't control what you can't control, so don't worry about it. Take this as an opportunity, knowing that football is going to return back at some point. You are going to get your opportunity. It might not look how you thought it was, but it's still going to be there. But what you do right now and how you respond to this adversity is going to be what ultimately dictates your success. So
for sure,
take that as an opportunity. If you were, maybe a guy like you said yourself, who maybe didn't have a ton of recruiting opportunities in university, like, guess what? There's probably a ton of kids out there right now who are going to get those chances that are quitting. So if you're maybe that outside guy looking in, double down your efforts right now and get after it, because guess what? Coaches are going to be looking for players. Next year, we don't really know how the recruiting game is going to work, but at some point they're going to look for you. So make sure you're putting yourself in the best positions for when they do see you, they see something special.
And I always tell guys, like, and this is just directly from my story, is you control so much more about your future than you think. Like, I used to think in high school, like, man, like, if one school, is interested in me, then that'll be like my only option to play football. And I was fortunate that Laurier was like the school I wanted to go to academically as well. So it was a really easy decision, right? But I've had a lot of guys that I've coached, they're like, hey, like, I'm getting recruited by one school, but I really want to go to this other school. I always tell them, like, man, go to the other school and walk on.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, when you're in third or fourth year, no one cares whether you were like the star recruit or whether you just scratched your way on the roster. And don't get me wrong, like I get it's nice to have a signing day and commit and have the security of that. But like ultimately, what do you want? The first thing you got to want is, okay, I want a degree in this because I want to become whatever,
Yeah.
right? That's number one. And then number two is, where do I want to be? And football is part of that. But if you really want to go somewhere and, you're looking at this summer going, man, like I never got a chance to meet coaches from here, or they haven't recruited me yet or whatever, you control so much more than you think. Like get on Twitter, email, send us your stuff. And even if it ultimately, in a recruiting class, you go unrecruited or unsigned, if you keep working hard, you're going to keep giving yourself the best chance. Every school in Ontario has walk-on policy.
Yeah.
Right. And they're all different. And sure, it might suck that you miss, your first fall year, but, and you can attest to this, not very many guys play in their first year anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So really, what are you giving up? And it's not a guarantee, but there's a lot more guys that make it on that route than you think. We had a D lineman this year who we literally saw walking around campus. And we're like, dude, you ever played football? He's like, yeah. We're like, you want to keep playing football? He's like, yeah. And he's on our team now.
That's amazing.
And 2 years from now, I'm telling you straight up, the guy's going to be the next Coach V stud on the interior.
Yeah.
But, it happens more than you think. And we can all think of those guys, whether you were barely recruited or walked on. Like we started, we had an offensive tackle that we started. He dressed in 2 Yates Cups. He started it in one. He was a walk-on. We had another walk-on play in the national. He was dressed in the Yates, and he played in the national semifinal against Laval.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's just in the last couple of years, and guys that come right to my head right away. So it can happen.
Oh yeah, like you said, I can, even off the top of my head, I can think of 2 to 3 guys that were walk-ons almost every year that I was at Guelph that came on, and some of them had great careers, some of them fizzled out. But it's all about, what do you do when you get an opportunity, and how do you make the most of it? But so you talked about it maybe specifically with what you guys are doing over at Cambridge and how you're supporting the players through this, and I think all that stuff's awesome. And I know Coach Ferraro's doing lots of that kind of stuff with the junior Griffs. I haven't been as involved in the X and O's football stuff through this kind of COVID time, but you want to talk a bit about your other project that you've been working on, the 3-down development, and how that's a pretty cool and unique opportunity for players to kind of continue to progress and level up through interesting circumstances such as a pandemic.
Yeah, it's something that I've thought about doing, and like I was in school and going through teachers college as well. So the last 5 or 6 years of my life have been really busy. But I walk my dog every day and I listen to podcasts, and so I've been kind of following these different people that coach football basically, and also kind of give back and try and teach the game to anyone who's kind of willing to listen. And so whether it's high school coaches or retired coaches or college coaches, and they have guests on and stuff, and some of it's through USA Football, and I just have learned so much through mostly podcasts. Some guys have a YouTube channel. And for a young coach like me, it was amazing because I could learn, something from, hey, this is how Oklahoma runs their stick concept. Well, I'm probably never going to make it down to a clinic in Oklahoma. You know what I mean? But I could learn, this is Lincoln Riley on my laptop telling me how they run stick.
Yeah.
Or, different guys like that. And I just thought, okay, right now we have some time, and I was kind of doing, like I said, with Cambridge, like we were running these meetings. And so I was finding all this film to show the guys. And I was trying to get some people to come kind of guest speak to them, right? Trying to keep it interesting. And then I kind of thought one day, I'm like, I'm doing all this work, trying to put stuff together. And the kids are loving it, just like I'm sure they're loving it at Guelph, and they're wherever guys are playing football right now. I'm sure they're so thankful for what coach they're doing. I just thought, why don't I try and make this a little bit bigger so that if there's, kids who don't play summer football that are, craving football right now, or kids that, they're trying to learn and right now they don't feel like they have anything. I was trying to provide more of a Canadian context. And that's something that I think is lacking. And you know this as well as I do. Man, there's some really good Canadian football coaches coaching in the OUA and across the country. And really, for me, it was a way, that I could learn as well. And that's one thing I take away from it is, I've had a few people, hey, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. And I'm like, I feel bad because like I'm learning so much
Yeah.
stuff. You know what I mean? Like I'm sitting down, I was with, and it's for players and coaches, right? And that was kind of, I thought about, okay, do I want to do like a coaching podcast? Or do I want to do, like just try and do my own player development thing? And do I want to do it on YouTube or podcast, whatever? And I just kind of thought, you know what, if it's on YouTube, we can use the visual. And I think for like coaching X's and O's, that's so important.
Yeah.
And the more I did it, the more I was like, look, like this is so meaningful because it gives Canadian coaches and Canadian athletes, like I've had some CFL guys on, a chance to talk to other coaches and future players, and guys can really learn. So whether it's, coaches who are trying to learn, different systems or how people teach different techniques, or whether it's athletes, trying to ask questions. That's one of the most fun things we've done is I've done like an all access series, and I have 2 or 3 coaches or players from certain positions on all at the same time. And I'll just leave it open on our social media and say, hey, send me a question. And, like on Thursday of this week, I got Coach V, Darrell Adams, and Anthony Cannon on for D-line, and I'm sitting there going, I want to ask all my own questions, but I'm only going to give myself 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And, players are asking, hey, if you're an undersized guy, like what's your best pass rush move? Or, hey, do you coach your DNs in a 2-point or 3-point stance? And then coaches are asking, more complicated questions like, hey, against a puller, are you a spill team or a box team? And how do you coach that? And what's been really interesting to me too is like a lot of OUA coaches have said, like, have reached out to me and said, hey, like if you ever need to have someone on, like I'm totally willing to come on. And the way people have given up their time, like I'm just facilitating it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's been the most fun part to me is I have yet to really ask anyone who's like, hey, I don't have time for that right now. And the effort that the coaches who are coming on, like, Scott Brady's got all his cut-ups from, max defense. And we're sitting there talking, pressures with, probably one of the best young DCs in the country, right? And, different guys have done so much work, even in the background, right, to have a good product out there for people to learn from. So I think it's something that people can use, again, players or coaches. And it's accessible. It's on YouTube. It's free. That's a big thing for me is like, I'm just trying to help people that are as motivated as some of the people that I've been around. If you're a motivated high school kid or high school coach or university coach or whatever, trying to give back that way. And selfishly, like I'm learning a ton. Like we sat down and did our running backs all access panel, and I was like trying to take notes, as I'm managing the conversation. So yeah, it's been great. And the response from athletes and coaches has been awesome, and it's been really fun for me.
Yeah, man. And I think like there's so much that you just said there that I thought was awesome. But the thing is, like, what I think you're doing is such a great job of is the accessibility of course, how you're gearing it towards athletes and coaches, and you're putting it out there and it's free. It's on YouTube. There's video. All that's great. But the one thing that I think is so awesome is it's all about the Canadian game. Like even when you're breaking down the American concepts, you're kind of talking about, okay, well, how can we maybe tweak that into the Canadian game? And I think
100%.
I think that's something like a void that needed to be filled, right? Like Canadian football is unbelievable. It's amazing, but it's a completely different sport from American football.
And our
like, let's
rules
be
are
honest.
better, for the record.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. I've said that probably since grade 10. I've said, or grade 11. I've said, man, maybe watching the NFL is cooler, but from a player's perspective, playing Canadian football is, in my opinion, probably safer and way better. Like way better. But that's the thing I think people don't get is how different it is. And so
for sure.
And I think like the only similarities is that we kind of use a similar shaped ball, and some of the rules are pretty much the same, but the field size, the yard spacing, the ability to waggle, and all these things that we can do in the Canadian game make it so vastly different from American. And I think that's so awesome that you're actually providing content and educating people on the Canadian game. Because when I was in high school, you say, oh, if there's eager high school kids out there that want to learn more, this is an opportunity for them. Man, I used to do all this stuff, and I used to learn about the American game. Like, I was that hungry
Yeah.
high school kid who would literally fight my older brother to get on the computer, and I would just watch YouTube videos for hours of all American football. I'd watch coaches talk about certain drills, techniques. I'd try and emulate them in my basement or my backyard, depending on what season of the year it was. But for us to, or for kids now to have this resource that's purely Canadian and specific to the Canadian game, I think is amazing.
Yeah, it's been fun, man. And one of the interesting things for me, and again, like I sometimes feel like almost selfish because, I feel like I'm getting more out of this than anybody. But we'll break down, like, because we're all fans of football, right? Like, you're wearing a Texans hat. I'm a big Steelers fan. I love my Michigan Wolverines. We all watch American football, and I think one of the traps that coaches get stuck in is like trying to coach. Oh, I saw this play on Saturday. Let's just add a 12th guy over here.
Yeah. Oh
You
man.
can use, and like the thing, and I follow American football more than maybe, like, there's a lot of Canadian football, like, people who really say, hey, like, it is a totally different game. I think there's little pieces, like, for example, defending 3 receivers in the American game, our guys have more space, but there's things you can steal and like learn, and
Oh
and
yeah.
because there's so much variety from down south that, like, you can't just roll it out like, hey, we're going to run this because I saw the Steelers run it and we're just going to put a 12th guy over there somewhere. You can't do that. And I think it gets a lot of coaches in trouble, like, when you try and do that, or like, yeah, we're just going to play this cover 2 defense. Awesome. Like, well, yeah, the hashes are really far apart, boys. So
Yeah.
what's your plan? But it doesn't mean you can't steal pieces from it too. So it's one thing I'm always I always want to, especially with the Canadian content. My main goal is this. When I was in high school, I was the same. And I grew up in Guelph. I go to every U of G game. There's a lot of alumni from my high school that were playing at U of G, like, the Dunk brothers, Mark Durgan, guys that I really enjoyed watching. But when you go home and, like, like you said, like, you're just watching, like, oh, I'm watching American guys highlight tapes or American coaches drills and stuff. And, you don't really get exposed as a high school player or even as a coach to, like, all the great coaches that are doing stuff in Canada right now. Like, I feel like people think that, like, oh, the American game develops and, like, the Canadian game kind of just, like, steals stuff that the Americans are already using. But there's so much stuff that people are doing in Canadian football that's so unique and innovative and smart, and it's making the game, have so many more layers, like you talked about before. Like, all the different ways that you can try and, play coverage on a Canadian field. Like, it's so much more complicated. You got motion, you got waggles, you got formations changing 3 times before the ball snapped. You don't get that in the American game. And so I really wanted to give guys a chance to come on, and, like, for those guys like yourself or like other high school coaches and summer ball coaches or athletes that want to learn. I feel like a lot of people think, oh yeah, let's learn this coverage that the Seahawks do, or like, let's learn, how Michigan runs their RPOs. Well, like, that's cool, but, like, you should probably also learn how, people in Canada are doing it. And there just hasn't been that opportunity for those coaches to come on. And that's one thing I think people that get the experience like we had, where we get to play for and be coached by different guys and play against other teams, you really get that appreciation. You know what I mean? Like, I got an appreciation for, the work that the Guelph front 7 has done in the last, 8 to 10 years, linebackers, front 7 guys, because I was an O lineman. So, like, you didn't have to tell me twice that, Coach Clough and K-Mac and Grandy and those guys knew what they were doing, right? But if you're just a high school student, like, you haven't been exposed to that yet, So, like, you're not going to look up, oh, how does Guelph play their front 7, or how does Western run their 2-back, or, how does Carleton play match coverage? Like, you're going to look up what you see all the time. Whereas I think this gives guys a chance to, really understand how much great innovation and great coaching is going on our side of the border. And it can help you more because it's our game, right? It's the game you're going to play on Saturdays or on Fridays in high school. So yeah, it's been awesome. And just super fortunate that so many people have given up their time to do it. I really can't stress that enough.
Yeah, and like you said, like, hearing you talk about you starting your project, and there's a lot of parallels with what I'm doing. And I was a huge
Sure.
consumer of the podcast, and so much of what I've learned through my kind of 5-6 years as a coach has been through podcasts, through YouTube, through all this stuff. And what I saw was there wasn't really anything ever geared towards athletes. And that's what I've been trying to do my best with this is, you know, reach out to the people that I was fortunate to play with, or that I've been able to, you know, not or kind of cross paths with over the last little bit, and give that almost that insider access to like hear the stories, hear some of the struggles that we went through as athletes coming up, some of the mistakes we made, what we're seeing now as coaches, and trying to provide that for athletes as like hey, here's a place where you can maybe learn a few things so you can make a few of the, or make less of the mistakes that we made, and get to where you want to get to a little quicker. So it really is like you're just trying to grow the game and give back, because, you know, us two guys sit here and we were so fortunate to take so much from this game in terms of lessons learned, friendships made, just overall life experience, satisfaction. Like you said, it was a huge goal for you to make it to the level. Like same for me, man. Every single day since grade 9, my first football practice, every single night, pretty much until even still today, I fall asleep thinking about football, thinking about playing university.
Yeah.
And it was just like such a great opportunity to be able to actually go out and live your dreams, as corny as that sounds. So it's our job, it almost feels like, or our obligation to provide better opportunities for that next generation.
And I think that athlete piece is huge. And again, like, I think a lot of people, especially now, like you go on Instagram, you go on Twitter, it's like, oh, here's this 5-star who's going to Clemson. And he's, you know, I saw the video the other day. He's like the number 1 D tackle or whatever in the States. It's like 6'6", 300 pounds, just like running around the field. The ball looks like a grape in his hand. You know what I mean? So I think for a lot of like players, like that's what gets covered. You know what I mean? Like these guys that are great athletes and probably work super hard to achieve what they're achieving. But like, it's way more interesting to me as a kid from Ontario to hear about, okay, like how did Andrew Graham, you know, develop and get to where he wanted to go, or, you know, other players that are in my situation, right? Because let's be honest, that kid who's going to D1 that has offers in grade 9 to Clemson, Alabama, and Oklahoma, he's living a different reality.
Yeah,
right. He's not a John F. Ross or at Parkside, right? So, no. You know, that shining the light on that, and I think a lot of people too, like, way more people give up on their dreams than have their dreams actually not become possible, right? And like you said, you know, none of our journeys were perfect. You know what I mean? Like people might like look at, you know, hey, like you played and you were a starter and, you know, had a great career, but people don't understand, like, it's not like we were all recruited like that in grade 10, right? Like, I think there's a lot of high school athletes that look around and they see, you know, these guys that are getting recruited, and they think, okay, I'm not getting recruited. That just must mean like I'm not good enough. And I think if you keep working at it, there's so many stories. And I think that that's why it's so important that, you know, the stuff you're doing and your expertise, like you have such a unique viewpoint because you're obviously involved in strength conditioning, but you've also coached the game and you've recently played the game. Like you can really see that from so many angles. And I think that, you know, players often kind of construct this idea of, okay, this is what my career is going to be like. You know, in first year, I'm going to deal with this. And second year, I'm going to deal with that. Third year, I'm going to deal with this. And it's never what you think it's going to be. You know, it's never exactly the same. Like if you had told me, you know, after we were 1-7, you know, as a player, and I had just retired and, you know, my playing career is done. And like 4 years later, you know, I'd be part of the greatest comeback of all time, winning Yates Cup. Like I never would have believed that. You know, we were 1-7. We hadn't beaten anybody ever. And, you know, 3 years from now, you're telling me we're going to beat Western Yates Cup and I'm going to be like calling plays in the fourth quarter, you know, like that at that time would have seemed so impossible, but it's just, you work hard and good things happen. Right. And there's so many guys that, you know, go through those experiences that I think high school athletes can benefit from, because if you don't hear the stories, you just assume it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well,
right?
And especially in a time like this, right? Like when there's so much going on in the world. And like I said, it can, for a lot of these kids, it can seem like maybe the world's ending. Like for me to have some of the guys that I've had on come on, tell their stories, talk about all the adversity that they battled, I think it kind of normalizes it for these guys right now.
100%.
They're maybe looking at it and they're thinking, yeah, this sucks. It's unfortunate, but maybe this is just part of my story. Maybe this is just a challenge for me to overcome.
For sure.
And, that's the thing. Like I said, I hats off to all the kids right now that are going through this, because like, I won't sugarcoat it. It's a tough situation. It's not ideal.
Sure.
And it definitely is not in line with how you had your plan. Just like Jackson said, you have these plans. They never, they never pan out the way you want them to.
No.
And COVID is the best example of that. We didn't see this coming, but it's here. And so now you have an opportunity to deal with it. And maybe hearing some of these stories that these guys are telling might be enough to keep you going through a challenging time.
For sure. And I think if one story comes to mind, and I think you were playing in the game when this actually happened, but I coached a guy at Laurier named Malcolm Thompson, and he came in, highly touted recruit, but he blew his knee out his last year of high school, ACL, MCL, meniscus, and battled, and he had to sit out his first year, had to watch his whole first year. And, his second year, he's healthy again. He's off his ACL, but he's got to kind of work his way back up. And, he gets in the starting lineup, pretty much right away. It's this amazing training camp. And, he had in the next 3 years, I think he had like 5 pick sixes, like something crazy. And 2 of them were 100 yards or 110 yard, like full field pick sixes. He's an all-Canadian. And he's playing on a great, like that defense we had was like some of the best guys I've ever coached. And so he works his way all the way back to the top. So he had that, hey, you hurt your knee your last year of high school, maybe some teams stop believing in you. Maybe you stop believing in yourself, right? Like you got to go through all the physical pain and rehab that goes through. Like, it's not like you do your ACL and 10 months later, you're just better, right? Like it's hard work for a long time, right? And so then Mal gets all the way back to the top. He has a 2-pick game against you guys. And the second one, he's running it back, puts his foot in the ground. He probably would have had another pick six, blows his knee out, cutting back on the last guy.
Yeah.
So, he goes down again, and he was actually our MVP, our defensive MVP that year, and we won the Yates Cup. And on that defense, I think there was 7 CFL players now. He didn't play the last 2 games of the year in the playoffs. He's still our defensive MVP, and it was unanimous. If you'd ask anybody.
Yeah.
So he then, because he tore it so late in the year, right, he's then got to miss that next season, right? So you think about that, man. Now that's your senior year.
Yeah.
Right? That's your draft year, right? So now he's missed his last year of high school. He's battled back. He got all the way to the mountaintop. He's an all-Canadian, best player, one of the best defense in the country. We win a provincial championship, and he doesn't get to even play in the game.
Yeah.
Right? And then he misses his whole senior year. So he's not drafted, even though he'd been a 2-time all-Canadian. All these guys that he played with been drafted. He comes back. He's healthy again. He has another great year for us. But, like, you can tell, like, the guy has been through so much, and he's just playing like his hair's on fire. And, he misses his draft year, but he got signed by the Calgary Stampeders.
Yeah.
It's like, how many opportunities did that guy – and, that's one story, but that's a guy I always try and tell people about, because, like, he's gone through so much adversity. It's not easy. It's not like, oh, I'll just wait a year and it'll be all okay. Like, you got to do a lot of hard work, that most people don't want to do once, never mind twice. So, you don't control what happens to you, but, whenever the CFL gets back going, Mal's going to be in with the Stampeders, and he had so many opportunities to say, hey, I've already been an all-Canadian. I blew my knee out. We won the Yates. All my boys got drafted. Like, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
And no one would have blamed him for that.
No.
But he had his goals, and he kept himself accountable to those. And it's such a good story, and a guy I have so much respect for. So it's one of those things, man. Like, you don't control what happens to you, but you absolutely control your response. And I think that's what people have to keep in mind right now.
100%. And like you said, that is just one story. And I'm sure there's so many more from your time at Laurier as a player and now as a coach. You could probably think of a million more. And that's why I wanted to do this. It started with me just, talking to some of my old Guelph teammates, but it's like, I know your story. I lived it with you. I saw all these things. I saw all the things that you overcame to kind of get to this, pinnacle where everyone else is looking at you thinking, oh, you're amazing. It was probably easy. It's like, no, I know it wasn't. And I want to, provide the opportunity for you to share that, because I think there's so much benefit to it. And that's the beauty of, technology and all this stuff with podcasts. And we can do these types of things and make it really accessible and simple for people. As we kind of wrap it up here, you were talking about, a few podcasts and that kind of stuff that you were listening to and learning a lot from. You said the one was USA Football. Was that the Coach and Coordinator podcast?
Coaching coordinator, man.
Man, that's a good one. Have you ever listened to that episode with PJ Fleck?
Yes, dude.
Oh
don't even get me started on PJ Fleck. So here's a little story.
Yeah.
So I
oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
It's all good.
I've always been fascinated with like the whole aspect of culture. My dad's a high school head coach.
Yeah.
And I just find it's so hard to win. Like you just learn if you're in this game long enough, like people just think, oh, if you get the best players and they work hard, then you win. Like it's so hard. You know, we had a great team at Laurier last year with 10 All-Stars. We went 4-4.
Yeah.
Right. Like winning is so hard. And so I'm so interested in these people that can win consistently and particularly can win when they're not, you know, coaching Alabama, LSU, blue blood programs, right? Yeah. So I heard that episode and since then, I don't think there's a PJ Fleck interview that I haven't listened to. Some of them are just like PJ Fleck talks after they beat, you know, Western Lafayette in 2013. I'm just listening to see if there's any gold. And that's my guy. If I ever get to a certain number of followers, and I can pull trigger on tweeting at PJ Fleck to get him on the show, that's my go-to guy, man.
I'll be the first one to listen to that episode. I've listened to a handful of the Coach and Coordinator podcasts. They're all the ones that I've listened to are great. That one, man, it was like I listened to it. It was late at night. My girlfriend was working night shift. She's a nurse. I was home alone. I threw it on. I was like, I need to I don't even know. Like, I got to go run a marathon.
Someone give me a bench right now.
Like, oh, my God. Dude, I was so fired up. The passion and excitement that guy has and the way he, like, if you're a football fan at all, whether you're a coach, an athlete, honestly, check that podcast out. Your hairs will be standing on end. You'll be super jacked up to go and attack life because that guy is unbelievable.
Yeah, and what I like about his message is it's simple, right? Yeah. Like, it's attainable, it's doable. You just got to choose, right? You just got to choose to do it and choose to believe in that idea. And you know, and that's the cool thing, man. Like there's so many good ones out there. You know, I love the Make Defense Great Again with Chris Vassar. He's a good one too. That one's on Spotify. Might be on Apple Podcasts as well. But he's had some great guests on. He's just a really smart guy with a lot of good connections. I'm trying to think of other really good ones I've enjoyed. The Coach and Coordinator one, like I almost listen to every day. I walk my dog every day, so I got some kind of podcast going.
That's the beauty of having a dog, man. It's like the best accountability buddy for education. The amount of podcasts
100%.
or audiobooks that I've listened to while walking my dog is astronomical, and I thank him so much.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm trying to think now. Run the Power guys are awesome. If you're an offensive guy, you know they have some great guys on, and they do a really good job with their show. Ron Mackey's really good on YouTube. He's got like 1 million followers. It's crazy. He's a high school coach who's just, you know, invested in giving back and teaching, and he's done a really good job. So there's a lot, man. If you're looking to learn football, you know, if you have any object in your house that has internet, there's a lot you can do even right now. So
yeah, man. And most importantly, 3 Down Development. We got to shameless plug. Shameless plug. Sure. We got to shove it in there.
We're at 3 Down Dev on Twitter.
There you go. And YouTube and Instagram. I don't know. Is it the same? Just 3 Down Development on both platforms?
It's at 3 Down Development on Instagram. Twitter, that was too long. So we're at 3 Down Dev. And then our YouTube is just YouTube. And then you can search the channel 3 Down Development.
There you go. Well, anything else you want to say before we wrap it up there? We got our shameless plug in. We got to talk about PJ Fleck and all sorts of cool stories about athletes and everything. So if there's anything else you want to say, man, the floor is yours, but then we'll just wrap her up.
There's in terms of you got me thinking of other good episodes of Coach and Coordinator. And like you said, there's a ton.
Lay it out.
The Urban Meyer ones are awesome. I'm a Michigan fan, but in terms of leadership and coaching and, you know, approaching, you know, building a program, I read Urban's, well, more accurately, I listened to Urban's book, Above the Line. That was a really good one for me as well.
One of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah, it's really good.
Unbelievable.
Our culture, our culture program with the Lions, which we were rolling out this year, which I was really enjoying, is all based on that, and the PJ Flex stuff. So yeah, I would highly recommend, especially young coaches, because I think you get so into the X's and O's, and I did. I should have been looking at that culture stuff, way earlier. And that was really fun for me. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and we've got lots of good stuff coming out with 3 Down Development. So
Yeah.
if you give us a subscribe on YouTube, it helps us out and helps more people kind of get the memo. So
Yeah, and support it, man, as we're trying to grow the Canadian game here, folks, and bring some legitimacy to that conversation, because I know a lot of times people kind of look down their nose at Canadian football and, oh, it's not as good as American. It's there. It's just it's not getting the attention it deserves. The quality is there, the people are there, the athletes are there. It needs more attention. Obviously, I'm biased. We're both biased, but man, support the game. Before we go, I was just, while you were talking there, I was looking through all the episodes that I've downloaded of Coach and Coordinator. Another really good one that you would enjoy, because you're a Steelers fan, is the Mike Tomlin episode. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that one, because Mike Tomlin always just seems like quiet, and I don't know, he's got that kind of like stone face. It's just, in that episode, he kind of just lets it fly, and I thought that was kind of cool to see that other side to him. But
for sure.
all right, man, well, I'm going to stop the recording there.